Hello, and welcome to Around the Political World with John Rothman. I am your host, John Rothman. If you're a fan of the show, make sure to hit the follow button on the top right of Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you are listening at this very moment. When you hit follow, leave a review or share an episode with a friend. It helps other people discover the show, keeps us going. As I like to point out each and every day, it expands our base. I want to speak with you this morning about several very serious matters. The first is a proposal put forward by the Secretary of Defense, who may call himself Secretary of War, but by law is the Secretary of Defense for the United States of America, insisting that if you are a Pentagon correspondent, you must conform to the Pentagon rules, or you will not receive the credentials you need to stroll those interesting halls. I want to be very clear about this. Never in the history of our country, even in the midst of war, have we seen this kind of censorship of freedom of speech and of the press, which, by the way, violates the First Amendment, the first article, rather, of the Constitution of the United States. This is something that we need to think about, because enshrined in our Constitution, the first article is freedom of the press and freedom of speech. And now we are told that a decision has been taken by the Secretary of Defense, who calls himself the Secretary of War, that will limit our rights. Now, the interesting thing is that every medium dealing with press credentials, except one, a far-right group which I've never even heard of, is agreeing that this is wrong. That includes all the major media, all the networks, CNN, ABC, NBC, CBS, all of the major newspapers in the country, all of the major broadcast networks, by the way, including Fox, all are saying that this kind of imposed rule, which limits the ability of the media to do its job, is unacceptable. And yet, the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, is going ahead with this arbitrary, imposed rule, clearly with the acquiescence and support of the President of the United States. I want to express to you in my most emphatic terms that this is a disaster for American democracy. I was on KGO 810 AM for almost 3 decades. I've been doing news writing for a lot longer than that. And I am now doing a podcast. If I were told that I could not do what I do with complete freedom, I would not do it. I used to tell you when I was on KGO that if anybody tried to tell me what to do or what to say, I'd leave. I would not have stayed. The only exception was in the case of a colleague of mine who had legal trouble, and we were asked not to speak about it on the air so that the case would not be jeopardized. And yes, all of us respected that decision. But this is extraordinary. And I want to remind you that the only person who has violated security at the Department of Defense is the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth. He's the one, remember, who posted information about troop movements during a time of war. There is something to be said for being responsible as a journalist. It is quite another thing when a federal agency tells you what you can and cannot report. This is unacceptable and needs to be rejected uniformly. Indeed, although this was the decision of Pete Hegseth, he could be overruled by the President of the United States. But Donald Trump has not said a word. This is deeply troubling. And all of the former correspondents at the Pentagon who I have spoken with or heard describe this situation have all said how appalling it is, what a limitation on our constitutional rights it is, what a limitation it is for the media and for freedom of speech. I ask you to consider carefully what it means when an administration which took an oath to the Constitution of the United States, the President and the Secretary of Defense, when they do this sort of thing. It should be a red flag on every level. And I want to say a word about John Bolton, the former National Security Advisor to the President, who, as part of the President's retribution campaign, is now being threatened with indictment. You may agree or disagree with John Bolton, but I want to be very clear when I tell you that Bolton is a very bright guy. We had him on KGO many times, and I can tell you from personal experience that I believe that any attempt to indict John Bolton would be wrong. And by the way, this applies to Jim Comey. I think the indictment of Jim Comey is wrong. I think the indictment of Letitia James, the Attorney General of New York, is wrong. And I think that the effort now to indict Adam Schiff, United States Senator from California, would be equally wrong. When we have an administration with an enemies list going out clearly and directly to indict political enemies, and when the President of the United States has the audacity to state this publicly, this needs to be rejected by the American people in our entirety. Democrats and Republicans, Trump supporters and Trump opponents, this is something which no administration ever should be allowed to do. I have pointed out in the past that when Richard Nixon compiled an enemies list, there was great revulsion on the part of Democrats and Republicans. Now that Donald Trump has an enemies list and has weaponized the Justice Department, where is the outrage from the Republicans? Can you imagine if the Democrats were pulling this kind of stunt? If Obama or Biden or Clinton had done this sort of thing, the outrage that would have emerged from the Republicans. The deafening silence of Republican leaders is just appalling. I have chosen this morning to describe these two circumstances to you because I believe they are so important, so critical in the days ahead. What kind of democracy we have, what kind of freedom of speech we have, what kind of free press we have, is in large measure dependent upon what happens next. And when it comes to indicting the former National Security Advisor to the President, not to mention all the others that we've just mentioned, let me be clear. This is not a healthy turn for our democratic system. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Around the Political World with John Rothman. I am John Rothman. Make sure to follow along and let me know your thoughts on the show by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts and sharing an episode with a friend or colleague so we can continue to grow and expand, which, of course, is our goal. You can interact with me on Facebook, LinkedIn, or, of course, my direct email. And I want to say a special thank you to Gogo Zoger, who makes sure we are up and running each and every day. I'll be back tomorrow. This is John Rothman, and you are listening to Around the Political World with John Rothman. See you tomorrow.